Namaste, sir. I'm here, sir. Whenever you are ready, I'm ready for that. Okay.
Within 5 minutes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Madam will join here. Shantarao was telling about you, sir. That you
sir.
are in Vijayawada. Otherwise, I would thought that you were in Delhi.
Okay, sir. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Right, sir. Welcome.
What are your calling?
Raju, good morning. Raju, good morning. Madam Manjulata, madam, good morning. Department, please mute for all your phones. Keynote start. Keynote start.
Good morning. Good morning to you. Is my voice audible? Hello?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Good morning to you all. Today's guest of honor, Professor Vijay Lakshmi Garu. Madam is Principal, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar College of Law, Andhra University. Another guest of honor, Professor D.S. Prakash Rao Garu. Sari is Chairperson, Faculty of Law, and the former Principal, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar College of Law, Andhra University. Today's keynote speaker, Dr. Banerjee Chaka. Sari is Professor of International Law and Dean, BTAP School of Law, with Andhra Pradesh University, Vijayawada. Dear participants, colleagues, press and electronic media, I welcome you all. I am Dr. P. Subbarao, Director, Center for Study of Social Exclusion and Inclusive Policy, Andhra University. I am very happy to inform you that as part of my central activities, we are organizing this very important webinar on a contemporary topic on human rights and development of vulnerable communities in India. As we all know that, in simple terms, human rights are the inherent and essential rights of human beings. All humans, irrespective of their race, nationality, religion, caste, sex, language, etc., possess them. These rights are quite basic and fundamental for a man to lead a life with dignity and respect. These rights help to protect all persons from severe political, legal, and social abuses. The concept of human rights involves the recognition of mutual respect, dignity among human beings, or little known despite the inherent rights of humans to live without interference was found even in some form or the other in the early times. Slavery, bondage, and human trafficking were most common in every society, be it Greek, Roman, and even in our ancient India. Though the idea of rights and liberty have existed in some form in the human history, yet people were merely treated as property and were forced to work against their will. Individual liberties continue to recognized by every state in the world. The significant development came in 1215 when King John of England proclaimed some liberties and granted some privileges to the people by a royal charter. In India, slavery was abolished by Act of 1843, and this law liberated the cultivating class from the landlords. The United Nations recognize the basic dignity, equal rights of humans, and the need for protection by a universal declaration in 1948. The constitutional makers, led by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the chief architect, was conscious of the social and economic inequalities to Indian and including several protective provisions for the development of vulnerable communities like scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, OBCs, minorities, women, children, elderly, and so on. He exercised great care in drafting provisions meet for the welfare of these categories of people. The protective provisions enrichment and fundamental rights are basically aimed at protection and human development of the vulnerable groups. Dr. Ambedkar left the need of honoring of the basic rights of human beings, absence of discrimination, and provided adequate safeguards against their denial. Some of them are rights for protection, protecting educational and economic interests, share in political participation, representation in public employment, freedom of speech, freedom of association, right to life, and so on. Friends, we are all know that the government of India enacted the Protection of Human Rights Act in 1993. The Constitution also provided for constituting a committee for scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, backward classes, women, minorities. And today, these constitutional bodies are discharging their duties with an aim to protect the rights of respective groups. The government of Andhra Pradesh, led by Chief Minister S. Jagannath Reddy, has also constituted the Human Rights Commission in addition to commissions for scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, backward classes, women, and minorities. Undoubtedly, the Constitution provides solutions for the present day problems that are being faced by the vulnerable groups in Indian society. Still, they are unable to protect their rights due to poverty and social ills like caste, which continues to interfere in their lives. As a result, we find several cases of violation of human rights and offences against the oppressed communities. In view of this, our center is organizing a national webinar on human rights and development of vulnerable communities to examine the major issues faced by these groups in the perspective of rights and to ensure that these guaranteed rights are honored for their development. I call upon the participants to actively engage themselves in the deliberations and be benefited by the presentations of these eminent law professors. With these few remarks, I thank one and all, and I request today's guest of honor, Professor V. Lakshmi Garu, to give a few lines on this national webinar. Welcome, madam.
Good morning, sir. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning, madam. Welcome.
Welcome. Am I to speak now? Just joined a little late.
Yeah.
Yes. So, good morning to the director of the seminar, Professor Subarao Garu, and the speakers, Professor DS Prakash Rao Garu, and in fact, he's my senior colleague here. And the other speaker, that is Chaka Banerjee Garu. He's also a professor of international law and dean, VIT school, and all the other participants and audience, and the other, whoever are the invitees here. Now, thank you, Subbarao Garu, for inviting me as the chief guest of this webinar. And very first, that the title of the seminar, that is the, you have said that title is Human Rights and Development of Vulnerable Groups. So human rights, as you have briefly briefed up now, just that they are the rights which are very inherent to every person. They are inalienable rights. And then, yes, they are the natural rights. They are all these things, and they include and all. So first of all, when we say human rights, the very question comes that, is it that human rights should be required in such a way, they should be recognized in such a way? Because being a natural humans, don't we have the rights? Is it that because there is a constitution, there is some legislation, or there is some kind of other rules and regulations we have having rights? Or apart from that, without even having, don't we have the rights? So a person by birth acquires the rights. Whatever a caste, creed, originality, jurisdiction he belongs. But then, it is not that as simple as we are thinking. The rights which we are saying that these are the constitutional rights, these are the fundamental rights, it is not, all are not fortunate enough to enjoy all the rights equality. Originally, history of the human beings, maybe at the ancient, very ancient period, there was no such question of claiming the rights, because human beings were free. They used to move freely. They enjoyed the nature. They had unlimited rights towards each other. But slowly, the question of claiming the rights, rights over the property, rights over the resources, and then among the human being itself, those are the groups where they themselves prove that they are the dominant people, so they can subserve, or they can exploit the other sections of the human being. So that's how a kind of exploitation and all have started by one sect of the human beings to the another. Though we say all are equals, but in reality there is a far difference in actual practice. So slowly the concept of a human rights has arose. It is in fact is being defined by John Locke in 16th, 17th century there, that they are the moral claims, they are the entitlements towards the fundamental rights, towards the enjoyment of the freedom rights and freedom to liberty and all other things. So when the exploitation of by the one sect over the other sect have continuously increased, naturally the state and the society itself has started that yes, there should be some kind of a mechanism in order to suppress such kind of exploitation and provide the justice to the people. This was the object. And with this, the concept of a human rights has arose, has been developed. And we know that these human rights are not overnight that are being coined. At the first, when in the first generation we human rights, we say they are the cultural, political, economic, social rights that were concerned, and more, even the states also, they have started concentrating on these rights. Again, the new kinds of rights, because whenever the circumstances changes, so naturally new kinds of challenges that comes before us, and to address those challenges, new kinds of rights that are to be recognized. So therefore, in due course, these rights are to be, new rights are being added up to that. But then the question is development. We are saying that human rights as a development, human right development to the vulnerable group. Now, what is a development? When you are saying a development, it implies that all things are not good. There still we are lagging behind. We still need to move, progress further. The word develop. So the question is a development in which regard we want development. Is it a physical development? Is it 1 minute, sir? లేదండి మీకు ఇది పంపించాలి కదా నేనే లేదా ఇది ఫార్వర్డ్ చేసుకోండి ఇది కోటా పల్లవి కొట్టుకొని రైట్ so that is the development said. So development, as I told you, it implies that there further should be done. Now here, looking into the sex, what kind of groups they are. In the society, we have a different sex of the people. It is not just one, everybody is an act. Though UDHR, Universal Declaration of the Human Rights Declaration is there under Article 2, which is the base, which speaks about the equality. But then, in reality, all are not equal. And we are observing in the society itself that, yes, equality is not there in each and every sect. So, therefore, in order to address the issues, it provides the justice to the people. And then we say the vulnerable groups. So, who are the vulnerable group and what kind of development they require? So, vulnerable groups, it is a very long list. It is an open list. There are so many kinds of vulnerable people are there who are vulnerable, who are being deprived of their basic rights. They include children, women, war victims, HIV patients, and migrant laborers, child laborers. There are a number of, there is a list, as I told you, there is a list of so many. Girl child, even child, again the girl child, and they are the, again, subcategories are there under that. So why these vulnerable, what kind of vulnerability they face? Children, for instance, they face the vulnerability something different. They may undergo the child labor, they may go under child trafficking, they may be victimized for say education, they may not be provided with the proper education, there may be used for other one more thing that is there, that organ transplantations. So the children, they are deprived of, in fact, living freely, freedom to live. Freedom to live means what? In the proper, whatever the proper way that is to be lived. But then they are deprived of this. They are being exploited. Similarly, women are again one of vulnerable groups. And when these women belongs to the backward and other classes, they are doubly victimized. As a weaker section and also as the backward section. So they get involved, they don't have the proper resources, they are not being involved in the decision making, they are not having the economic empowerment is not being properly provided with. If the girls are adults, they are being used for various purposes which are against their rights, against their wishes and all those things. Similarly, whenever there is war goes on, just example is that Ukraine war is going on, we are seeing it, how the women and children, they are suffering and they want to cross the borders and what. And during the war also, it is the women and the children who are the maximum exploited there. And they definitely need protection of their. Similarly, the laborers, child labor or whatever the laborer, migrant laborers, their human rights, so they do have a rights. They also expect. Laborers, the question comes, the wages question. Are they being given proper wages? Are they being taken care of the shelter, food security? All these are the human rights. But yet, no, not yet. We are not even, we are trying to provide. We are trying to address these issues. But yet, a lot is to be done in this regard. So here, three aspects that one has to understand. One is human rights, what are the standards of the human rights? That means what are the different human rights that are available? How do the national legislations? So we do have the United UN DHR is there, and how far is the limit means no. National legislations can go beyond that. They can provide more than what is being prescribed under the human UDHR therein. So that is the one thing. And every day or the other day, some new issues arise. And in order to address that, again, some new kind of system is to be adopted by the states. So first is the standard of protection. What should be the standard of the protection? That should be taken care of. Then second is the monitoring. Now, monitoring is again, it is not just granting the rights because something happened, okay, we will make the laws against exploitation of a woman, exploitation of a child, these that laws are making, not that. Second is the monitoring. Who will monitor whether these laws are properly maintained or not, whether they are implemented or not? Are the victims are really receiving the benefits of these laws? So that is the second part that is to be taken care of, implementation. And then coming to that, third stage is that the ways in which they are implemented. How do they is implemented? Because state is a state, whether it is a state means center or the state government, whatever it is not that they have the only one issue to address. So therefore, these rights, which are, we call it the human rights, they are to be implemented by the state machinery. Now, this state machinery may be a central government machinery or a state government machinery. And in order, being a member of the UN, India has also implemented the human rights. And in this order, we have the Human Rights Act of 1993 that is there, and through which we have the National Commission, State Commission, and also there is a provision for human rights courts. So this mostly at the National Commission or the State Commission, what is the main job of these commissions is that whenever there is an issue comes before, they take up the issue and then they address the issue and make recommendation to the central government or the state government for the further action and all. So this is with the how does it work and all, but then what is my personal view is that these vulnerable groups, which need much more care than what we are providing, and it is not just the duty of the state that it should take care of or it should implement or something, or not that. Every one of us are bound. We have a duty to take care. We have a duty to respect the fellow human beings and take care. We should not exploit them. We should try to see that they also come up and join the mainstream of the society. And if these come to the mainstreams of the society, then there is a true meaning of the right to equality. And once this is provided, obviously there will be economic growth. Because of the exploitation of these, economically we lag behind. Because these sectors who are being exploited, they will not be able to contribute to the economic growth. Either they will not be able to contribute, or their contribution will be very less. At the same time, because of this exploitation and all, then health issues will arise. There may be mental illness or it may be a physical illness. In either way, these vulnerable groups, maybe the old age people, they are also a sect of vulnerable groups who require a maximum care from the dependents. So because of these things, the economic growth also so health issues will come, economic growth will come, culturally also we will lag behind, because they will not be, because of these exploitation, they will not be able to express themselves. The very expression we want to make, we are saying right to freedom of expression, speech and expression, right to live. That is the basic right guaranteed by the Constitution. Right to live means what? Do you want that right just like animal existence? No, more than that. Just like a human being, that we want to read. A person and a human being, there's a difference. Anybody is a person. But when you say human, all the human respect, every person should live with a dignity, with the respect. he should enjoy, he should not be discriminated. All the rights, all the facilities, all the schemes that government is floating for the benefits of these vulnerable groups and all, the main objective is to bring them up to the mainstream and see that the state progresses, and as such the humanity is protected. With few words, I'll close my remarks. Thank you. Thanks to all of you.
Madam, thank you. Thank you for your valuable message on this occasion, madam. Dr. Shivaram Krishna lastly brief all the ideas of speakers. Thank you so much, madam.
Thank you.
Namaste, madam. Namaste, madam.
Yes, madam.
Yes, madam. Note immediate ఇచ్చాను కదా. ఇంకేమైంది 94411.
ఏమిటది నేను ప్యాకెట్ చూద్దాం అనుకుంటున్నాను. వాట్ ఈస్ దిస్ అని అసలు ఇంట్లో తిన చిన్న మాట ఉందండి.
జాయినింగ్ విత్ us.
ఎందుకంటే ఆ టైంలో దానికి 11:12 కాకేసి వస్తుంది.
కానీ కొంచెం
సుమిత్ర మేడం లాగా కొంచెం పట్టుకోవచ్చు.
హలో సుబ్బారావు గారు.
సార్ మార్నింగ్ వెల్కమ్ సార్.
వెల్కమ్ థ్యాంక్ యూ సో ప్రోగ్రామ్ స్టార్ట్ అయిపోయింది కదా. ఓకే
స్టార్ట్ అయింది సార్. మేడం ఆల్రెడీ
మేడం గారిది అయిపోయిందా?
అయిపోయింది సార్.
ఇప్పుడు నేనేనా? ఓకే
నెక్స్ట్ కీనోట్ అడ్రస్ బెనర్జీ గారి వెయిటింగ్.
అదే తర్వాత అది ముందు నేను 5 నిమిషాలు మాట్లాడతాను, తర్వాత
అలాగే
లేకపోతే ముందు కీనోట్ ఆయన చేత చెప్పిస్తారా?
ఓకే సార్ మీ ఇష్టం.
అంటే నేను 10 నిమిషాలు మాట్లాడదు మళ్ళీ ఏదన్నా ఎవరైనా కేకేస్తే నేను మాట్లాడేస్తాను. నేను మాట్లాడేస్తాను. Respected Director, Center for Social Exclusion and Inclusive Studies, Professor Vijayalakshmi Garu, Principal, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar College of Law, Andhra University. My distinguished student, friend, Dr. Banerjee, Director, National the Law School, WIT, Amaravati, and other dignitaries and invitees and participants. Good morning to everybody. As the theme is regarding human rights and marginalized sections, as we know, the concept of human rights in the ancient times, particularly when the concept of right was not known to the people. Ancient Hindu jurisprudence speaks of duties. Dharma is considered as a duty. Raja Dharma, Putra Dharma. So different duties are assigned to different categories of the state. Bhishma, concept of sovereignty, in Mahabharata explained all these things. If you go to Roman jurisprudence, Roman society, Cicero, what is just to the society is just to everybody. So justice is just. So as far as Greek ancient society, we know the popular personalities like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. So they lived with some morality. So Socrates is a best example for a morally duty-bound citizen of the state. That's why when allegations were there, he faced the prosecution, and when he was punished, then he gave a famous proclamation. So for now, the state respects me. So for now, the state protects me. That's why when the state imposes on me the death penalty, I have to honor the state action. Even though in those days he has an opportunity to escape, he did not escape from the clutches of the state, and he faced and he drank poison and all these things we know. Then when the concept of state was considered as an important entity in human societies, the human civilizations from generation to generation, from century to century, developed, particularly in medieval period, which faced a lot of crisis when there was a war between church and state. Ultimately, state was emerged as mighty power, and church was confined to the religious matters. So why we consider England as the oldest democracy? Because for the first time in England, the monarchical government was challenged by the people. So people prepared this Magna Carta. So subject to the rights provided in the Magna Carta, the king has to administer the country. The king has to rule the country. So then we know Rousseau, Locke, Hobbes, those people came and the people under the social contract created this particular state. While creating the state, they could not transfer their inalienable moral values, inalienable human values. So they did not delegate their common power. They delegated their common power to be ruled, but they did not delegate their natural rights because they have no right to transfer them to the state. So under the social contract theory, which was more acceptable for the origin of the state, we know the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the Russian Revolution, Indian national movement and freedom movement, and we got independence and we prepared our own constitution. So all these provided in the name of, that's why the history of natural rights is history of human rights or not. Some dilemmas are there. By and large, history of natural rights are history of human rights. But the American Constitution proved the world that human rights and natural rights could be positivized, could be enforced. So they provided Bill of Rights. So in our Indian Constitution, the spirit behind fundamental rights is the Bill of Rights of American Constitution. So when we prepared the Constitution in the modern thought of that particular origin of the state, which has support of the social contract theory. But of course, the 1970s, from 1970s postmodern period, Rawls came. John Rawls wrote a book on the concept of justice, theory of justice, and where he understood the original social contractarians created the state, but the present social contractarians, their aspirations, their problems, their expectations are not reflected in the state document, rather we say constitution. So say for example, at the time of passing of Indian Constitution in 1950, the Muslim in 1950, the Hindu in 1950, the Christian in 1950, they have different social expectations, social aspirations, economic aspirations, political aspirations. But in 2022, the Hindu is different, the Christian is different, the Muslim is different. These are known as new social contractarians in the words of John Rawls. So the problem is to be understood in the light of new social contractarians. Then the thought was further advanced by Martha, where at the time of formation of the state, the marginalized people, the neglected people, the women, the children, the old people, the disabled people, even animals, their voice was not reflected in the social contract. The mighty people of the particular time, at a particular given time, in a particular society, the state was created because of the social contract of mighty people. So they have prepared the state. They have created the state to meet their expectations. So in 2002 or 3 afterwards, when the Frontiers of Justice was written by Martha, she raised this beautiful point. So far now, the socially excluded people are to be brought into the mainstream. When Thorat was the UGC chairman, under the influence of Martha's the thought, created some 20 to 25 social exclusion and inclusive centers. The present center is also part of that Thorat's brain chain. So to look into the problems of minorities, women, backward classes, neglected people, SCs and STs, like that. So that's why here my point is, because already the keynote speaker is there, who is in whose academic excellency I have a lot of confidence, and I believe that he is a good researcher and academician. So here, my point is that Martha came, then Amartya Sen came, who wrote Concept of Justice. The removal of inequalities in the society is the justice. So, as far as the theme of the today's seminar is concerned, so how these how these people were marginalized. So here, no problem. Actually, the nation's interest is to be reflected. The political expectations, the economic expectations, the social expectations are to be realized for all the people. Equality is to be uh, understood, applying the equal opportunity to the people who are situated in equal circumstances. Like should be treated, alike should be treated, like should be treated alike. Different people are to be treated differently. So here the problem under the Indian constitutional 72 years experience from 50 to 2022, we had experienced various aspects of social transformation in society. The status of women was increased, the status of minorities was increased, the status of backward classes was improved, the status of SCs and STs were improved. But the problem here is that the what we say equality was provided at the beginning stage, providing equal opportunities. For a considerable period, the state and intellectuals also thought have the ideology that while providing equal opportunities to the people, we guarantee the equality. For some time, it was followed. Then the question of distributional equality comes. So, unless we distribute the equal opportunities provided, the non-accessibility of the some groups in the distributional justice itself is inequality. So the theme of the present seminar, in my view, reflects this particular thing. Then at the final stage,
టీ కూడా తెచ్చిమన్నాను
Robert Nesbitt
మళ్ళీ ఇన్సార్లు తిరక్కు
developed the equality in the concept of equality of result. You provided opportunities to the people. You provided a mechanism for distribution of benefits. But what is the result? So equality is to be understood at the end value as an end value in the form of equality of result. So say for example, reservations were provided. So some vested interest groups snatched away the benefits. Grandfather was the IAS officer, father was IAS officer, daughter or son IAS officer, grandson IAS officer. So creamy class, creamy groups, creamy classes were created, formulated because of these policies. So in my view, the present seminar should address the problems of snatching away of the benefits by some less privileged people in the section. So how can we remove these disparities? How can we protect the interest of the marginalized, the neglected, the depressed and oppressed, suppressed classes? So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much. Subbarao garu. Okay. సుబ్బారావు వాయిస్ వినపడతలేదు. సుబ్బారావు గారు మీరు మూట్ లో ఉన్నారు చూడండి, ఒకసారి మూట్ మీరు అన్మూట్ చేసుకోండి. అయినా మీ వాయిస్ నాకు వినపడదు. ఓకే.
Sorry. Thank you, sir. Important keynote. Dr. Banerjee garu will give a keynote address to the audience, and then my colleague Dr. Sivaram Krishna brief all the ideas of experts, and then anyone who wants to ask any questions, any doubts, you are freely welcome. After that, my another colleague, Dr. Babawali, will propose vote of thanks. Now I request Professor Banerjee garu, please provide your valuable insights, sir. Your voice is not visible. No, sir. Not visible, sir. Not visible, sir. Yeah.
Not audible.
Okay, sir. Okay.
అది పడతలేదన్నా మీరు ఫోన్ Okay. Okay. 2 minutes. Very good.
హలో Please wait. Our keynote speaker is connecting to another phone. Please bear with us.
dignitaries, distinguished teachers, Professor Vijayalakshmi Garu, Professor D. Surya Prakash Garu, and others in the law faculty, Professor Sita Manikan Garu, my ex-colleague Dr. Prasad, participants, good morning to this webinar. Just after the formal welcome address by our director, Dr. P. Subbara Garu, on the conduct of the program Human Rights of Vulnerable Communities, the Women Rights and Development of Vulnerable Communities in India. We had two distinguished speakers in the morning. Guest of honor, Professor Vijayalakshmi Garu, has explained about the backwardness and why she has raised an important question. Does development is necessary? And if development is there, if development, Banerjee sir, 1 minute sir, few minutes. If development is required, that means it implies that there is underdevelopment and there are some issues being faced by the vulnerable sections. We have two eminent speakers. We had two eminent speakers, guests of honor, Professor Vijayalakshmi Garu, Professor D. Surya Prakash Garu, and authority in commercial laws and authority in Professor Surya Prakash Garu, authority and constitution and human rights. And he has many alumni and his direct students who have occupied. All of these teachers have distinguished members on the judiciary, higher judiciary also. We welcome Dr. Banerjee Chakka sir. Long back we have seen. Dr. Banerjee Chakka Garu is Professor of International Law and Dean. He did his LLM from School of Oriental African Studies, University of London. And he did the MPhil and PhD from JNU. A brief introduction about Banerjee Chakka Garu, Center for International Legal Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. My director has asked me to just give a brief introduction of Professor Chakka Banerjee Garu. He did his postgraduate diploma in Learning, Teaching and Research in Higher Education, National University of Ireland. He was British Chiving Scholar. He was Associate Professor and Registrar at National Law University. His earlier moorings was in international school, in Indian School of International Law. Then he moved on to international national law institutes, and he was also lecturer at School of Law, National University of Ireland. He was legal advisor to ICRC, International Committee of Red Cross, based at Geneva. He was also research associate at the Indian School of International Law. Published several articles in the field of international aviation space law. He delivered lectures in various orientation programs and refresher courses. Judge, he is associated as a judge with Manfred Law's International Space Law Moot Court Competition. Was part of Judge Philip Jessup International Moot Court Competition. Also Henry Dunant Memorial Moot Court Competition and Price Media Law Moot Court Program organized by University of Oxford. He was researcher at the Center for Studies and Research in International Law and International Relations, Hague. Doctoral scholar at Hague Academy of International Law. He is a specialist in international humanitarian law. As I know, he is part of ISIL and also he is a professional membership. He has professional membership in various institutions like Society of International Law, European Society of International Law, Indian Society of International Law. His commitment to international humanitarian law is well known across the major South Asia and other countries. And we are really happy to have Dr. Chakka Banerjee Garu, who will deliver the keynote address on human rights perspective. Rather, we are restricting his domain area. He's a specialist in IHL, as I know, but we are restricting him to development of vulnerable community categories of people. Thank you, Banerjee sir, for having accepted our direct invitation. It's up to you, sir. Please deliver the keynote address.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me, sir, now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. And I apologize my technical mishap. When I joined and spoke with Subbarao Garu, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. This is Ramakrishna. Okay,
yeah.
Sir.
When I spoke with Subbarao Garu in the morning, it was very good, but unfortunately, there is some technical snag has been developed. Now I think it's okay. All of you able to hear me?
He's just here, sir. Subbarao sir is also here.
Yeah, can you hear me, Ramakrishna Garu?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I
Okay.
could hear you, sir.
Thank you very much. And indeed, it's a great pleasure for me to be part of this important talk and discussing the human rights and the development of vulnerable groups in the context of India.
Sir.
And I'm really thankful to the Center for Studies in Social Exclusion and Inclusive Policy, Andhra University, for extending me the invitation to speak on this particular topic. And I am also thankful to Professor V. Vijayalakshmi Garu, Principal, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar College of Law, Andhra University, and Professor D.S. Prakash Rao Garu, Chairperson, Faculty of Law. And in fact, when I had an opportunity to visit Andhra University, is it okay? Can you hear me? I think there is some disturbances. Okay, so I always feel privileged that to be at Andhra University, whenever I get an opportunity, I generally don't miss the opportunity to come and speak and interact and also have an opportunity to share my opinions, because ultimately Andhra University, from where one of the affiliated law colleges I've been graduated. And I take this opportunity specifically to thank Dr. Shanta Rao Garu and Professor Subbarao Garu for giving me this opportunity. Today, in this particular topic, when I was looking at the topic has got different folds of understanding of human rights law. Prior to me, Professor Vijayalakshmi Garu and Professor Surya Prakash Rao Garu has extensively spoke, and also Director Subbarao Garu has given the basic idea of human rights law. I do not want to go into the details of that particular background of human rights law. Rather, I specifically look into the very important aspect of right to development, and then followed by the aspects of why the right to development is essential for the purpose of uplifting people, those who have been excluded from the mainstream and they have been marginalized. And they have been marginalized because of their belongingness in particular group or a caste or a religion or maybe whatever the social group. So in that, why today still we are debating in the concept of development. And what is the concept of development? Why it is essential for human rights scholars and the students of human rights? When we ask this particular question, it is not very easy to answer. And today we are living in almost 21st century. And we have seen the developments of international law, and asking and imbibing the cultures of each and every state. And prior to me, you have heard from the speakers like Professor Surya Prakash Rao Garu mentioning that 72 years of independence has given the liberal approach for the protection of the rights of the individuals in our constitution by way of giving the positive discrimination. In spite of all these things, why we should still today talk about the concept of development, why the development is essential for the vulnerable people. So this is what I would like to focus. And my address will be in 3 parts. First, I would like to talk about that right to development as a human right. The first thing. The second thing, what is the international legal mechanisms which have been insisting the state parties to give that particular right to the every sections of the society. And then second, I talk about that the concept of the rights which have been enshrined under our constitution and how this constitution is trying to translate the idea of rights and the fruits of development to the vulnerable sections as in the quote unquote process of providing positive discrimination or affirmative action or reservations to certain groups of people, and how far we have achieved that particular goals. That's the second part of my address. And the third part of my address, where we are in fact realizing this particular rights today in the age of economic liberalization, and also when we are looking at that nationalistic opinions which have been culminated, a resurgence of earlier ideologies. Okay, now this is the three parts which I'm trying to talk. I hope I am making myself clear to all of you in the particular context of trying to talk. Let me go back briefly to talk about that. What is the right to development? Like we have seen that the human rights discourse have started way back in 1945, which I'm talking about not the historically. Historically, Professor Surya Prakash Rao Garu already spoke about that ancient Indian societies, ancient Roman societies, and in Western societies, how this particular rights have come. And he has given very wonderful background of that one. I don't want to go into that. The first point which I would like to say that the reaffirmation of the rights which are there ever since the human generations have come, which has been primarily transformed into a enumerated rights of the people which are recognized under the United Nations Charter. If you look at that United Nations Charter of 1945, specifically talking about the rights of the people, for the purpose of the protecting the rights of the people, we must need to have the primary important thing is that we need to be able to achieve the international peace and justice. International peace and security and justice is the precursor of enjoying the rights of the people. Please remember that. Today, we have seen that wars. Today, we know Ukraine war has become very famous for various reasons. But almost 85 conflicts are going on across the world. Can you imagine that? What kind of problems which they have? Mostly they are all non-international armed conflicts, where groups of people fighting against each other, and the state is becoming so repressive, violating the rights of the people. If that repression is generally happening and to take away the rights of the people, vulnerable groups are more in danger during the repression of the rights of the people. So that we have to remember. Now, coming to this 85 conflicts which are going on, and the so-called international war which is going on between Ukraine and Russia is what we call it as that now, unless you achieve international peace, security, you cannot achieve the justice. That is what United Nations Charter has realized. And at the same time, in order to achieve the justice, international peace and security, because that was adopted during the time of colonialism, and they said we need to end the colonialism in order to have this international peace and security. And there, the international community has recognized the rights of the self-determination of the people, where people will have a political right and civil right to determine what kind of a political system they want to have and enjoy their rights. So that is one of the wonderful rights which have been given under the Charter, and also subsequently the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948. This Universal Declaration of 1948 is the kind of a precursor for all the rights. If you look at that, the development which we have seen from the rights perspective, which have started, but are these rights really talking about the development of the people, or only it is ensuring civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights? If we are talking about that cultural rights, is the cultural rights is not embedded with the other civil and political rights? There is a lot of debates which have been involved in it. So now, first let me, the second point, let me go back to the important arguments given by the international scholars with regard to the recognition of the rights of the development within the discipline of international human rights law. It started way back in 1970. Why it has started 1970? For that, we need to understand entire international politics. Why we need to enter into the international domain and politics to understand the Indian political scenario? Because 1945, when the charter was given by the international law or United Nations Charter, India was still a colonial country where it was occupied by the British colonialism. Subsequently, we have independence in 1947 and we participated in the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights. When the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was written, people like Vijayalakshmi Pandit and others have actively participated in order to reflect the ideas of the people. The founding fathers of the United Nations Declaration 1948 said that we will have that Universal Declaration of Rights of Men. But people like Eleanor Roosevelt and also Vijayalakshmi Pandit and people from India, women's group, and they actively said that why we need to talk about the rights of men, why can't we have human rights? That itself shows that how the vulnerable group of women and children and the girl child have come to a fourfold of the recognition of the human rights of the people explicitly in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. For me, as a student of human rights law, I feel that it's a momentous occasion. Recognition of the assertions of the people is a first step in while we are talking about UDHR. So now, the third point within the first subset, which I would like to say that this particular recognition, subsequently, we have got the enforceable rights under International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, International Covenant on Social, Economic and Cultural Rights. And after that, the very idea of development have come up during late 1970, because by the time all the colonial countries have recognized and they got an independence. And during the time of independence, during the time of colonialism, people have lost their fortunes. And these colonial states have been looted and plundered by the colonial masters, which we know. I do not want to go back into that. And during that time, when they're aspiring to become a developed independent states, and there are no resources, and there is no advantage of the development for them. So that is where the third world scholars and judges like Professor Dr. Mohammed Bedjowi of International Court of Justice, an Algerian judge, specifically said that we must have a development. Human rights cannot be ensured without the development. For example, people are starving in poverty. When you are starving in poverty, when you do not have the daily basic meals, how do you enjoy the right to life with dignity? Of course, Indian Constitution has recognized in the process of the judicial activism in the late 1980s and 1990s. But how about in the beginning? When we have got the independence, millions of people are under the poverty. We have got the famous famines like Bengal famine, and we got the independence. Independence was started with elimination of millions of the people in the borders, and with the refugee problems, with immigration problems, and India has carved out its geography and its boundaries in the midst of so many problems of poverty and underdevelopment. Now, when we are drafting our constitution, should we not realize all these problems of economic development and the social development of the people? So Dr. B.R. Ambedkar has recognized that importance by looking at that developments which are taking place in international context, my dear friends. Let me come back to that, how the international platform has been developed, the right to development. Mohammed Bedjowi is the president of International Court of Justice. He said that the right to development is the precondition of liberty, progress, and justice, and creativity. Today, we are sitting and talking about the exclusion and inclusion. If a person starving and suffered with the famine or suffered with drought conditions, or they were abused, they were completely marginalized from the mainstream, can you expect them to have a creativity? Obviously, we can't expect them to have a creativity. That is why in Indian Constitution, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar has recognized that we need to have a social justice. Before achieving the political and economic justice, we need to achieve the social justice. That social justice is a precondition of liberty, progress, and creativity. And that is the precursor for entire human development. So, in Algerian judge in the International Court of Justice, he said that that is a right to development is the precondition of liberty. And it's a progress and a justice, without which you cannot achieve your liberty, you cannot achieve your progress, you cannot achieve your creativity. And still, social justice is one of the important things. And he considered that it is alpha, omega. He considered that the right to development is the beginning and the end of achieving the rights of the people. So that is a wonderful thing which we have seen from the judge of the Algeria, who is chairing the International Court of Justice. And professors like George Abissab, he is also an Egyptian judge. He is a professor of international law. And even our own Professor Nobel Laureate, Professor Amartya Sen, he said that without development, you cannot achieve the rights of the people, come what may. Unless you have this, and then it is not. So that is the founding and the foundations of the right of development within the notions and within the debates of human rights. And this particular opinion, whatever I said, the words of Judge Mohammed Bedjowi, and it's representing the views of the many of the developing countries, and also not only the developing countries, the views of the people of marginalized and vulnerable communities. Marginalized and vulnerable communities. So, this particular right of development has been the subject of discussion for over 40 years now, where the UN General Assembly, the United Nations General Assembly resolutions were talking about that the development must be the part of the human rights discourse. And the dividing line between the developed and developing countries must narrow down, must be addressed by bringing the development in the forefront of United Nations debate. Unless you have the human development index is raised, you cannot have the ensuring the rights of the people. So we have to realize the right may be well be employed, if not abused, to formulate obligations upon the states. But we need to provide the development aid to the countries which cannot on their own realize the rights of the development of their inhabitants. So this kind of international new economic order was started from the 1970 with the adoption of the new international economic order. The UN resolutions have come forward, and in order to enforce the basis of the right to development and also including the fairer terms of global trade, debt relief, and a compulsory transfer of technology. These are the main ideologies which have been put forward during the time of 1968 and 1970, which started the entire debate of the right to development in the world. And slowly it is coming to the developing countries like India. Now, what was the problem if we talk about that right to development? Here, the right to development has two phases. The first phase is that which is perceived by the Western world. They think that if right to development is recognized as a right of international law, third world countries may perceive that it is the right of the state, and they can claim a compensation, financial compensation for exploitation of the countries during the time of colonialism for their unlawful enrichment of their economy. Colonialism and slavery, which were pushed all these developing countries, all these colonial countries into the brink of poverty. And all the Western countries, they have become the developed world. Now, if this debate right to development comes, what happens? These underdeveloped countries may go to the international courts and they claim compensation from their colonial masters. That is why Western world said that no, we don't recognize this one. And today, the global south, that is the developing worlds like us, the Asian and African countries are talking about that. We have to have a decent living standards for all the citizens of this country. And unless you respect that decent living standards, you cannot achieve the rights of the civil and political rights. We need to give the top priority for the realization of the right to development. So that is why, without specifically talking about the development, in the 1948 of United Nations Human Rights Declaration clearly mentioned from Article 19 to 28, I consider that it's a kind of modern Magna Carta of the contemporary international community for the development. What it says in this particular 10 articles, these 10 articles talking about freedom of expression and freedom of organization, right to participate in the public affairs, right to work and fair labor standards, the right to have a decent standard of living, right to have an education and a cultural life, and the right to have a social and international order with all the human rights, fundamentally they can be realized. So these are some of the articles which have become the part of human rights development story, which was already recognized by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 in accordance with Article 19 to 28, my dear friends. The same thing now has been divided into two parts, that is International Covenant on Economic and Social Rights and International Covenant on Political Rights, Civil and Political Rights. And these two formulates the right to work and fair working conditions. Today, let me come back to India's experience. Do we have these conditions to all the vulnerable people? If you ask that one, we say that, oh, first let us have a development, then we'll talk about that implementation of those standards to everyone. If I say very critically, we'll say that first let India shine. Let us have a bullet trains. Let us have a very pomp and posh airports, national highways. Then we will think about these vulnerable people. Can we do that? Certainly not. When your development stories goes on, you cannot eliminate the rights of the marginalized people or vulnerable people. That has to be taken into consideration by the state. So that is why the ICCPR, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, International Covenant on Social, Economic and Cultural Rights, has specifically mentioned that the civil and political rights cannot be ensured unless you ensure the economic and social rights and cultural rights. That is how the international legal mechanisms have come. Let me quote Professor Murchison what he said: without freedom, there is no development. If you are in bonded labor, there is no development. If you are living in poverty, no development. So, if you want to have a development, each and every individual should have the capacity to enjoy the rights which are there. Let me put it, maybe some of economics teachers are available here. They may be knowing better than me. Unless we create a capacity to purchasing power of the people, can we have a development of that particular individual? That is what Professor Amartya has said. Unless you create the opportunities to each and every individuals, that person, that is a development, you cannot have the freedom of having and rights and enjoyment. And my dear friends, this applies not only to the state, but it applies to the people. And the rights of the people, it's the rights of the collective dimension of the human rights of the people for the vulnerable groups and others. So we need to have the rights of developments. So that is what happened. We'll have to go quickly to look into that, how the international legal mechanisms have done. When 1972, along with these two resolutions adopted by the UN General Assembly, we have the Stockholm Conference on Declaration of the Human Environment. When they were talking about that human environment, and they realized that, wow, most of the third world, people are suffering with the famine, desertification, drought, and excessive floodings. And how do we mitigate the problems of the environment? If you are not mitigating the problems of environment, we are going to have more human rights violations, particularly the vulnerable group of people. Who are the vulnerable? Women, children, indigenous people. If you come to the context of India, it is the Dalits and Adivasis. And these are the ones, they are more vulnerable because of if you are not protecting the rights of the people in the context of the environment. That is why they recognize the importance of the contribution of the vulnerable people and protecting the vulnerable people. That is why we have the Convention on Indigenous People today, because it started way back in 1972, my dear friends. And coming back to that, another important milestone in the context of a right of this whole development, which started with Declaration of the Permanent Sovereignty over Natural Resources. Now today, our natural resources have been alienated, given it to the multinational companies. But what happens to the permanent sovereignty of the people on that natural resources? The country states say that unless you alienate these natural resources, you cannot have the money in order to develop. But today, what happened to that? That we need to ponder upon that. I don't want to go further to criticize on that. Let me go into the details of my topic. That is the rights of the people in the context of the environment recognized by the people under the healthy environment. And that healthy environment is recognized way back in 1986 and 87 in India by the Indian Supreme Court also. Let me go back to the 1992, the Rio Declaration, Earth Summit. And here they further say that without recognizing the rights of the people and their development, we cannot protect the natural environment. That's exactly happened today. So in between 1972 to 1992, and great efforts have been done on the part of the third world countries in the United Nations General Assembly. They adopted the declaration with regard to the right to development. So that is the genesis of the declaration which adopted in 1986 by the UN General Assembly in order to give the rights of the people. And this particular declaration defines the right to development is an inalienable human rights of all the people. They are entitled to participate, contribute, and enjoy their rights, not only civil and political, but economic, social, cultural, and political development. Unless you are realizing this economic, social, cultural, and political development, we cannot achieve the recognition of the rights. Okay, that is my first argument and my first point in the keynote speech, which bringing all the relevance of international law and human rights into framework. The second one is that in Indian context, let me deal with an Indian context of how we started. Yes, as I mentioned, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar realized the importance of the social and economic rights of the people because he himself belongs to a vulnerable and marginalized community, that is Dalits in India. When he recognized that particular importance of the not only ensuring the civil and political rights, he also realized that unless you have the economic, social, and cultural protection for the rights of the people, you cannot achieve the development. That is why the concept of the development in the Indian Constitution clearly stated that first, let us look at the preamble of the Constitution, very beautifully arranged. The justice we need to achieve first socially. Once you achieve the social justice, then you can achieve your economic and political justice. If you achieve the economic development, but the social justice is not there, then what is the point of having your development? That is exactly told by Professor Stiglitz, Joseph Stiglitz. He is the World Bank chairperson. 10 years ago, he has written a beautiful writing on globalization and its discontent. Wonderful work. Globalization and its discontent. What he said? In 1995, we expected that the economic liberalization and economic globalization will reach, and its fruits will be reached to the every sections of the society. Every sections of the society. But after 10 years, 2005, what happened? We are not able to realize the goals of economic liberalization. We are not able to deliver the economic and cultural rights of the people by ensuring the economic liberalization. Then we need to rethink and rework on this economic liberalization. And when they started working, suddenly the world has experienced resurgence of the nationalism, resurgence of the communal politics, and now there is a great stop of the world globalization, economic liberalization. It is taking a kind of a little nap now. It's taking a break. Why? Because across the world, the people have started coming and saying that, yeah, these Indians are coming and taking our jobs. Let's make America great again. And these Eastern European and Middle Eastern countries are coming to UK and Europe. Stop the borders and make British again great. British is for the Brits, English speaking people, not for others. They closed their doors. Australia closed their doors. And India, we also closed the doors for people, those who are migrating, rather coming as refugees from the Myanmar. Otherwise, we had a good experience of allowing the refugees to come in. And what we said, we do not have the development. Anyway, I'll come back to that a little critical point a little later. Now, we are in the crux of an economic problems. Suddenly, the resurgence of nationalism, resurgence of communalism, then they stopped economic development. Now, what happened? The right to development has taken a backseat now. Because of the right to development has taken a backseat, then who will be the ultimate victims of this particular taking backseat of economic development? It is vulnerable people. In between, what happened, the 20 years period from 1995 to 2015, what happened? The WTO and other trade organizations have imposed some structural changes in every constitution, structural changes in the legal system. So they are saying that you cannot have subsidies, you cannot have the positive discrimination. That is where now the vulnerable people in India are pushing more backward than the coming back. Vulnerable people, because of the new economic policies which are adopted by the states, aftermath of the globalization, aftermath of the WTO policies, these vulnerable people are becoming more vulnerable because of this. That is where Joseph Stiglitz has mentioned. If you listen to the famous speeches made by the presidents of India during the Republic Day, let us look at that K.R. Narayanan speech, Abdul Kalam's speech, and Pranab Mukherjee's speech, and it reflects and reverberates three important things. We expected that India will cater the needs of the every vulnerable sections of Indian society, but the economic reforms which we have started way back into 1992 somehow not able to realize the aspirations of the vulnerable people. We need to take account of that one. So the same thing reverberated by the Joseph Stiglitz, who was the World Bank chairperson. Now look at that, the views which are coming. Now coming back to that in Indian Constitution, sometimes the Indian Supreme Court has become very, very active. We call it as a judicial activism. They try to implement all the directive principles of the state policy. I consider that it's a social and economic rights of the international covenant, which try to infuse into the civil and political rights. That is the part 3 of the Indian Constitution, gave the life to the economic development, social and cultural development of the marginalized people. Maybe if it is not boring to all of you, I can take one famous case. That is one famous case is that Volga Tellis case. Still that is relevant. Volga Tellis case, when pavement dwellers have been taken away by the Bombay municipality and they reach to the doors of the Supreme Court has said only one thing. Yes, you need to ensure the rights of the pavement pedestrians. But what happens to the economic development of this? The state has neglected. If the state has provided the economic development of these dwellers, they wouldn't have come and occupied. So it is the duty of the state, which are already enshrined into the directive principles of the state policy, must be ensured. That was the signal given by the state. Supreme Court has categorically told way back in 1980s. So that means we also started following the development story, but development story with a human touch. And enforcement of the rights of the people to the vulnerable sections like weaker communities as well as marginalized people and economic migrants. It's already there in Volga Tellis case. I can quote like that a number of Supreme Court judgments in the context of the ensuring the right to development within the saga and within the story of the human rights. Okay, until 1995, the court was very busy. They're talking about the social justice. They're talking about the distributive justice. They're talking about the welfare state. Now, what happened after 1995? The court started slowly becoming silent on these aspects. Now, look at the judgment which have come after 1995 to until today, particularly 2000 onwards. You don't find a social justice mechanism, my dear friends. And that's my research shows. I may be biased towards my research, but it is a fact. Now, in the light of this particular the situation, how are we going to protect the rights of the vulnerable? That's a question. And here, that brings me to go to that third aspect of my discussion, that is protection of the rights of the vulnerable groups in India. International dimensions and domestic constitution and Supreme Court mechanisms, which try to enforce, but in post-liberalization, what is the story? Now, before starting that, we will have to look at that, what the Constitution says. Constitution says it's a duty to ensure the social, economic, and cultural rights. Suddenly, that has been changed. In 1992, the story has entirely different, and that story has started and went into extent of till 2000, 2002, 2004. And the second UPA regime, please remember, somehow they realized we try to bring development with a massive, with over accelerated liberalization policies, but are they reaching? Certainly not. Then what did they do? They put a little brake and started going slowly. During that time, these economic forces like multinational companies and others, they criticized that UPA 2 is not doing anything what they have done in the first one. And today, now they don't want that government, we will take away. They have done it. But let me tell you, during that first and second regime, there are two important economic developments which have taken place. That is one, ensuring a basic minimum standards of the people by bringing Manrega, Mahatma Gandhi National Rozgar Employment Guarantee Scheme. And that is providing some kind of a guarantee to the people, those who have lost their hopes in the system. At least that is providing. And it was considered as, whether it is a World Bank or International Human Rights Forum, it's considered as one of the best policies where you are creating purchasing power of the people. Instead of giving money through populistic schemes, we are creating purchasing capacity by giving work to the people. And that is a decent standard of living we are creating through the Manrega. And that is where, which enshrined under the UDHR from Article 19 onwards, Article 21, 22, 23, 24, and also ICCPR and ICSCR, my dear friends. And the second important thing is that now, in spite of not doing that, still people are suffering poverty. How do we do that? We need to give that food security. And the Food Security Act, which came into 2013, is another revolutionary mechanism in the context of ensuring the rights of the vulnerable people. Who do you need the food security today? It's not you and me. We are fortunate enough. Thanks to our fathers, thanks to our parents, thanks to the system which we got. We are nicely sitting here and talking about human rights in the air-conditioned rooms, in the Zoom link and Google Meets, etc. But there are so many lesser mortal, those who are not even having a basic decent meal. And the government ensured that, yes, we need to have the food security to all those people. They ensured the food security 2013. That is one of the means of bringing guarantee to the people towards that direction. Now, after that, what happened? 2014, we have changed. Everybody said that no, because these are all, there are so many things which I don't want to go into there. But we realized that, oh, now, last 6 years, nothing was happened. Let's start what development. The new government which came up in 2014 started with the development. And what is happening with the development? Now we know. The development is accelerated in a mode where they're trying to undermine the rights of the vulnerable people, my dear friends. Now, the completely government social welfare mechanisms which are part of the developmental story of the Indian Constitution was stopped. And they are saying that no, we are, and they started various schemes. And that schemes, I call it as a populism. This populism undermined all the constitutional guarantees, my dear friends. The populistic schemes like Prime Minister, what is that? Shrama Yojana. Okay, E-Shram. That means, you pay 50 rupees, you get your, whatever the benefits of the PF, if you are an unorganized sector labor. And the other thing, there is no social welfare measures. They have completely taken out. We have seen that new social welfare codes and labor codes, wage codes which are coming up right now, they are completely taken out the social welfare protections. And the social welfare protection now, my dear friends, is primarily rooted towards vulnerable people. Let me take one example. We all talk about that outsourcing. We are very happy about the outsourcing. Which are the services first have been outsourced? It is the toilet cleaners, housekeeping jobs have been outsourced. Why did they outsource? Because that becomes a burden to the exchequer. That means if you don't outsource, if they are the government servants, the government have to extend the social welfare policies. Now, by outsourcing, what are you doing? These vulnerable people who are there in the outsourcing jobs, it is the Dalits and Adivasis. And now the new economic policies and these policies, what happened? They have taken the social security measures and they are now outsourced all these menial jobs, and those who are engaged in the menial jobs, majority of them are coming from marginalized sections. Now, this economic globalization, the saga of development has taken a backseat, which started way back in 1970. Now we started with economic development of globalization. Now we are impinging upon the vulnerable people, my dear friends. Outsourcing is the classic example we see today. If today they come, they clean, we pay 250 or 300 rupees, whatever. Then if they don't come, we don't pay. It's a cool. The government, has, washed off their social security and social welfare. And where is the protections under the Constitution, my dear friends? And where is the development which envisioned by the people like Muhammad Badjovi, George Abisab, Amartya Sen? Are they realizing now? No, it's not realizing. Now, today, we are living in the midst of that kind of circumstances, my dear friends. And we are saying that, yes, we need to have a pragati. Sabka Vishwas, Sabki Pragati. And the development. That development has been reached to the vulnerable people. Mr. Parvati, you are disturbing me. Please mute your audio. Madam, please mute your audio. Thank you. Now, what I would like to just say two more minutes and conclude my talk. That is, now the international level, they started drafting the Convention on the Rights of Development in 2020, which came, and it is drafted, and it's been put forward for the United Nations General Assembly adoption. But now it is good. International level it is happening. But what about India? What about the groups of the people here in India? We talk about that so many. Like, let me tell you that I've been talking about the vulnerable groups. Who are the vulnerable groups, first of all? We talked about women and girls, children, refugees, internally displaced persons, stateless persons, national minorities, indigenous people, migrant workers, disabled people, elderly persons, and people those are affected with HIV and AIDS, and traveler communities, gypsies. We have so many communities in India, and sexual minorities, lesbians, gays, and transgender. And without this list goes on. And in India, we have millions of the people still, they are marginalized because due to their descent. That is a caste marginalization. And how are we going to address all these people? Now, whether these rights of the development, which we are talking, which are recognized as a fundamental human rights, are we realizing in India in the wake of economic liberalization, where this economic liberalization has become intertwined with the nationalism? This economic liberalization intertwined with the nationalism, what is happening today? They are putting full stop to all the social welfare measures which are there under the Constitution. Now they are introducing the populistic schemes. And these populistic schemes now becoming a candy or a kind of toffee to children, candy to the children. Like that, it's becoming a kind of luring the people of the marginalized sections. But what about that economic development? Nothing. Now coming back to the last point, when even this kind of populism, the populistic schemes have been introduced, and states like Andhra Pradesh, so many even criticize, saying that, why are you giving? So you remove this and remove that. You have already removed the legally available social security measures which are there in the Constitution. And now you introduce a new economic policies by outsourcing everything. You are not paying, social welfare mechanisms are not there. But top of that, when the states are looking at these people saying that, yes, these are the unfortunate people, they do not have the access to the education, and we need to provide the access to education, and they are giving the school reimbursement fee and all, and people are saying that, why are you giving? You are making people as a lazy. So that means now they started there removing everything constitutional guarantees. Now these populistic schemes also, they are asking them to remove. Okay, I am not campaigning for the populistic schemes. I am campaigning only for the constitutional safeguards must be available to each and every vulnerable groups of the people in this country. Unless we ensure that one, populistic schemes will be here today and tomorrow it will be gone. If the new regime comes, the new things will come. But how about the constitutional guarantees? Are we working on that? Are we looking into all these things? How it's impacted upon? We have to look at it, my dear friends. I am not talking all these things just out of blue. There is a scientific evidences. There are scientific writings which have been published across the country and the world, and we need to look at it. And now the first evidence is that all the law teachers will be knowing the earlier labor welfare legislation have been scrapped. The new wage code, new social security code, they are coming. Today, you contribute, you save, and save for the future. State is not there to afford all these things to you. So that is how the human rights of the vulnerable people and the development of the vulnerable people have come to a halt. And people talk about various positive discriminations. And when we talk about the positive discriminations, then we say that, yeah, they are becoming the adopted children of the state. But today, these policies are only implemented in the public sector, but where is the public sector? Now, because of the globalization, all the public sector units are up on sale today. Are you ensuring the rights of the people? That is why we launched into another mechanisms. So, my dear friends, this is what I want to bring, the 3 important points, and I stop it here. I can keep on go on, but it becomes a political speech. I don't want to go into the political speech. I'll stop it here. If you have any questions, I'm very happy to answer all those questions. Thank you so much.
Dear participants, anyone raise any questions, please? You are free to raise your doubts. Anyone, please respond immediately.
I think I have provoked enough all the people with a lot of provocations. And this provocation must give some questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Banerjee Garu.
Thank you, sir.
You gave a wonderful message in this occasion. You gave from international to national level policies and constitutional safeguards for the welfare of these vulnerable groups. We are very, very much impressed.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay, sir. Thank you. I request my colleague Dr. Ramakrishna to brief the entire proceedings of this webinar within 5 minutes. You finished?
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. At the outset, at the outset, I thank my director, our director, for organizing this webinar and inviting the law professors who are specialized in the topic human rights. And the human rights is again coined. The human rights, the title of the webinar, we have development of vulnerable groups, vulnerable communities. It's and immediately our sir contacted law professors to speak on this topic for the webinar, and Banerjee Chakagaru was also identified, and he was immediately contacted. Madam Vijayalakshmi Garu has explained about the first generation, second generation, third generation, of course, fourth generation is also there, digitalization of rights. And she also has raised concerns about the children, girl children, HIV/AIDS victims, women, children, child laborers, migrant laborers, children, and other vulnerable groups who are disadvantaged and whose human rights are at most times violated. We felt the true meaning of equality and development can take place only when these sections of people are protected and their rights are ensured in accordance with the Constitution. Professor D. Suryaprakash Garu, Principal College of Law, former Principal Dr. B.R. Ambedkar College of Law, Chairman Faculty of Law, was kind enough in accepting the director's invitation, has given the meaning of human rights in jurisprudential tone, touching upon the ancient Hindu texts as well as Greek and uh, uh, Greece and French Revolution and all these things. He has cited all those things. He has related about Roman society and how Cicero has mentioned about how justice is being just. He has referred to various philosophers like Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, who felt that there is a relationship between the rulers and the ruled, and how the church was confined to religious matters in England, which was the oldest democracy. And he has also explained about the social contract theory, the thinkers like Rousseau, Hobbes, Levitt, and Rawls, who has propounded the theory of justice in 1971, and how he has meant for distribution can take place only when equitable distribution of goods and services, goods and material wealth is distributed equitably among the all the sections of the people, particularly the vulnerable. So that's how he has also given about, referred to Martha Nussbaum, Amartya Sen, and how the 72 years of constitutional working has improved the conditions of minorities and the backward classes, minorities, children, women, and others. To some extent, compared to the pre-independence days, the position is somewhat better. He referred to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who has championed the cause of social justice. And Professor Banerjee Garu, Professor of International Law and Dean VIT AP School of Law, he had begun his address with the development in human rights perspectives, raised questions what development means, for whom development, what development is, for whom development, and how development can be made possible. He raised three questions, and he put his address in three perspectives, and he has answered all those in the affirmative. And he referred to the UN charters and how it was not rights of man, but it was rights of recognizing women's rights. I may not be out of place to mention that countries like America was also behind in granting voting rights or political rights to women. Women fought for their political rights long time and until they have attained. That is about, if you see, look at the American history, US Bill of Rights. Later on only they have given, but of course, Ambedkar has given in 1940 in the Constitution itself, though it took at the time of promulgation, at the time this Constitution came into force, Indian Constitution has included the rights of women, children rights, adequate representation of weaker sections, and socially economically disadvantaged groups by various articles: equality, liberty, equality, fraternity, justice. All these things are so important. Social justice is what Ambedkar wanted to promote, and he has placed some of the economic justice principles in Part 3 and Part 4 of the Indian Constitution, which speaks about equal pay for equal work, distribution of material goods and services equitably among all the people. This is what I can infer from the address of Dr. Banerjee Garu. He has also mentioned about the modern Magna Carta. Modern Magna Carta, as enshrined by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in Constitution, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of association, all these things were promulgated based upon, which are of course not be based upon the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And he has given the best constitution, most workable document, which suits the present day conditions also. So, and he has also explained about ICCPR, International Covenant on Civil Political Rights, International Covenant on Social, Economical, Cultural Rights, Cultural, Economic Rights, and social rights, cultural rights must go together. That's what he has explained. We cannot simply demarcate, distinguish, or delink these rights. So right to development, as expressed with consent, right to development has taken a back seat. The new economic policies, he has lamented about the new economic policies. And he wanted the economic policies and the present policies to encourage, to go in accordance with the constitutional guarantees and by honoring those constitutional guarantees. So yes, I also mentioned about the UN Convention on the Rights of Development 2020 and rights of millions of people who are vulnerable in India. And these things we can develop by giving constitutional guarantees, by recognizing the rights of the vulnerable people, by honoring the rights of those people, which are some of the legislations which are already in place, giving force to the constitutional guarantees. Thank you, sir. Our participants have immensely benefited by your address. I thank our director for giving me this opportunity for just summing up the address of the three speakers today. I request my colleague Babawali to propose a formal vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, one and all. On behalf of Center for Study of Social Exclusion and Inclusive Policy, Andhra University, and on the occasion of today's webinar, Human Rights and Development of Vulnerable Communities in India, I am very happy to present a formal vote of thanks to the esteemed dignitaries who participated in different capacities. It's my privilege to thank today's guest of Garu, Principal Dr. B.R. Ambedkar College of Law, Andhra University, who gave wonderful and inspiring inaugural speech on the today's topic. My thanks are also due to today's one of the guest of honor, Professor D.S. Prakash Rao Garu, former Principal Dr. B.R. Ambedkar College of Law, Andhra University, who gave elaborate information on this issue. I also thank today's keynote addressee, Professor Dr. Banerjee Garu, Professor of International Law and Dean, VIT AP School of Law, Vijayawada, who gave an erudite speech on today's topic. My thanks are also due to the participants who registered and participated in this webinar. I am also expressed my thanks to technical experts of the Andhra University. I may also thank my colleagues for their continuous support to organize different webinars on for the center, from the center. My thanks are also due to Professor Subbarao Garu, Director of the Center, for his for conducting numerous relevant programs and running the center smoothly. Thank you, Ananda.
Thank you so much, sir. Yeah. We can leave now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, bye.
Sir, 1 minute, sir. Okay, sir. Namaste, sir.
బెనర్జీ గారు బాగున్నారా?
బాగున్నాను సార్. మీరు ఎట్లా ఉన్నారు మీరే?
నమస్తే మాస్టర్.
నమస్తే సార్.
బాగున్నాను సార్. బాగున్నాను.
నమస్తే సార్.
సార్